Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside me today. Today I would like to go over 5 things with a few bonus ones sprinkled in of things that you should have as an archer. Whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or a professional, I think all 5 of these things are super critical to having success with your archery and to ultimately better enjoy the sport. The first thing we're going to actually talk about is a bonus one, not necessarily my top 5 because it's not actually a physical thing to have, but rather a knowledge that you can have. And that is a very critical, important piece, and that is knowing or having the knowledge about your bow, how your bow works, what are the specs of your bow. Sure, I know this is an Elite Energy 35, it's set at 60 pounds, 30-inch draw, but what's the brace height? What is the actual axle to axle measurement? Which it says it's Elite Energy 35, right? So it should be 35. It's not. It's actually 34 3/4. And so that's why I always keep a Ziploc bag or a binder full of all of my bows or my particular bow setup and all of the specs. And more importantly, once I get it set into spec and I get it sighted in and I get arrows tuned for it, I write all of that information down. What is the exact brace height? Where is my peep in location to my D-loop? What is the inches of measurement there? What is the actual draw length? Is it 60 pounds? Is it 59? Is it 61? What's my actual draw length? Sure, it's measured at 30 inches, but when I actually stick it on a draw board, it comes out to about 30 1/4, 30 3/8. That's a totally different ball game. Okay, so I know that's cheating. That's not a physical thing that you should have with your bow, but it's definitely a mental thing that you should have and something you should really keep track of as you go through your journey with archery. All right, so the number one physical thing I think every archer should own is a kickstand. And I'll put this and all the other materials that I'm going to show in today's video down in the description below if you're interested in these specific items. A kickstand for a bow I think is paramount, and the reason why I like using a kickstand is because we all go out in the backyard and shoot, and what do? We lay it down on the ground, or we build a big stand for it out of PVC or wood or something. The problem with laying it on the ground, it's picking up all the grass clippings and dirt and dust and debris that's in your yard. It's getting collected into the fibers of your string cables, it's going into your limb pockets and into your axles, and it's gumming up your bow. Now sure, it's not super dirty, sure, it's not really all that detrimental, but why would I want to put dirt and grit and grime into something that I'm trying to maintain by waxing and doing all those other things? So having a kickstand allows my bow to sit upright on the ground with just the bottom part of the cam touching the ground. Also with that fixed stand that you build for your yard, that's great, but what if you go to a 3D range? Where are you going to put your bow? What if you go to your local range? Where are you going to put your bow? Having a kickstand, I think, is paramount. Now, this is a Pine Ridge quick stand, and I really like this one because it has multiple settings. Right now, I have the legs extended all the way out, and I have the jaws extended all the way in because I shoot a solid limb, very thin limb Elite bows. All of my bows are Elite bows, and it allows me to adjust that till it fits the exact width of my limb. If you shoot a wider limb bow like the new Hoyts or the Matthews, they have a super wide limb pocket system. You can expand these all the way out. You can shorten up the legs. You can get your bow to sit at any angle. Certain bows are more of a D shape, and so their limbs are at a farther reflex position, and you have to extend these legs out to make sure your bow is sitting upright. You don't want it to tip over when you're on the range because that's kind of embarrassing. Now, they also make fixed position ones where the jaws are set at a particular size and the legs are a particular length. I try to avoid those because I shoot a lot of different bows and it might not fit your bow. In particular, like I said about the thin single limb bows or the wider split limb bows, it might not fit, and you don't want to buy something that's not going to fit your current bow setup. Thing number 2 is kind of a no-brainer. Most of you probably own it anyway, but it's a full set of Allen keys, both standard, metric, as well as the torque set. Usually they're sold in a 3-pack, and it's really beneficial to have all 3 because you don't know when you actually might need to work on somebody else's bow. So for example, a lot of the module screws and a lot of bows today are going with a Torx head system, the star or the 6-sided system, instead of an Allen key. And so having that Torx head is going to help you if you have a module. For example, Hoyts and Elites use the star head system. You're going to need to change those out or maybe move them if you go to sell your bow. Also, and this is kind of something you run into every now and then, the standard sizes, the SAE, they're mostly the ones you're going to end up using, but sometimes I've run into sites that have particular screws on them for pins or other things that the metric actually fits better. And so it's nice to have all 3. I usually carry both the Torx and the standard, but if I'm working in the home, in the shop, I'll have all three there on my bench, and I can have access to any screw that I could possibly come in contact with. Speaking of working on your bows, I think the next thing that I prefer over a particular other thing, which I'll talk about in a second, is using a bow square. Now this is a T square from Easton. They also make an L square, which doesn't have the top part. This is just shifted down and it's an L shape instead of a T. They both work exactly the same, and I strongly prefer this over the leveling system where you have the little snap-on level that goes onto the arrow and the clip-on one that goes onto the string. When you watch any videos online, you'll see a lot of people say, well, the one that clips onto the string, it doesn't clip onto the serving and the string, it's on at an angle, and you got to stick it in a bow vise, which is another purchase you have to make, and it doesn't sit perfectly level. Forget all of that. Just take this, clip this onto the string. It's a perfect 90-degree angle. You can slide it up and down, find exactly where your D-loop needs to be, make a mark on your string with a Sharpie, and you're good to go. There's no monkeying around with having the bow vertical in a vise. You could lay the bow down, have it at an angle, have it upside down. It doesn't matter because it's clipped onto the serving of the string, and it's a perfect 90-degree angle every single time. Again, another no-brainer, but having a tube or a couple different types of tubes of string wax is a real bonus. Now this is Winner's Choice Cobalt Ice string wax. It's a very thin, it's almost more like a Vaseline or a lip balm type of consistency. And then this is Bohning Textite, another great string wax. This is much thicker. This is more like a beeswax or a snow seal kind of feel. It's very important to have a string wax to maintain the life of your string and cables, and particularly if you have a string or cable that goes through a fixed cable slide, not a roller guard, but a fixed cable slide, like all my Elite bows do. Keeping that area nice and waxed and lubricated will prolong the life of the cables as they go through the cable slide, but also the life of your string where it goes around the peep and on the either ends of the center serving, which is where I usually see the most wear. And of course, as a side note, if you don't know, when you do wax your string cables, do not put any wax on the serving of any of the string cables. That's usually the black or the clear that gets wrapped around, that goes around the cams and the modules. Just put it on the exposed, usually 2 color strands of the string cables. All right, another thing I have here along with the bonus piece is a spool of D-loop material. This stuff is very inexpensive and it's super nice to have because on a good set of string cables, the biggest thing that's gonna go the fastest is your D-loop, because that's where you're constantly clipping your release on and off the bow and firing the bow, and it's gonna see the most wear and tear on the outside loop, inside in particular, where the jaws of your release close. So this is a 100-foot spool that I bought a couple of years ago, and I'm probably not even 20 feet through it, and I change a lot of D-loops because I shoot a lot and I go through a lot of string cables throughout a year on my several different bows. So it's really nice to have a spool of this stuff. Now this can kind of get a little fickle. Some people like a softer, more pliable D-loop. I prefer a real stiffer material where it really is rigid and allows you to clip on the string. As you see, this stuff will sit up all by itself. You can bend it into shape and it's going to stay that way. I prefer a stiffer D-loop material, but some guys prefer the softer stuff, and again, I'll put a link to this and everything else in the description below. As a bonus thing when it comes to D-loops, and this is not a necessary tool, but gosh, it makes installing D-loops a lot simpler, and that is getting a pair of D-loop pliers. Now these are Viper D-loop pliers, and they're not cheap. They run about 25 to 35 bucks, and all they can do is install D-loops. But if you're going to install a whole bunch of different D-loops, getting a tool like this or a multi-tool, I think Easton makes a multi-tool that has a couple different options on the head of the tool system. This is a really great addition to have to your shop if you're going to be doing a whole bunch of D-loops for yourself or for your buddies around the range. Alright, 2 more bonus things for today's video. The next thing is a spool or spools in different colors, if that's your choice, of some type of serving material. Now, I don't serve my own string cables, I don't make my own string cables, but 3D serving from BCY is a really good universal serving that allow you to fix a serving in a quick pinch, like the serving that comes in contact with your string stop, for example. That sees a lot of wear and tear from constantly hitting the string stop. Sometimes you get a center serving that will break prematurely on you and you need to fix it in a quick pinch. Using something like 3D in serving from BCY is a really strong, durable material, but also I find the vast majority of the time I'm using this to tie in peeps, tie in string silencers, simple stuff like that. You don't have to use a whole bunch of it. You don't have to spend a lot of money on a particular type of serving. I spent a couple of bucks $10 for both these spools. Got them off of eBay and Amazon, and they're a real nice thing to have around to help fix peeps, help fix servings when they're in need of repair. And last but certainly not least, and I almost would make this a complete you have to have, but it's not entirely necessary, but gosh, is it a great tool to have, and that is an arrow spinner. And this is a Pine Ridge arrow spinner. I think it comes around 20-25 bucks. A very inexpensive addition to your shop, and you're really able to see how straight your arrows are on end to end. And this is particularly true if you're going to buy a dozen arrows and fletch them yourself, and if you cut them shorter. So for example, this is a full length shaft, 32 inches long, and let's say you have a 28-inch draw length, and you cut your arrows to 28 inches. You have 4 inches off a 32-inch shaft that you can cut to make your arrow straighter, because remember, the ends are going to be the wobbliest. So let's say you put an arrow on a spinner and you spin it and you see the back end is super wobbly and the front end is really good. You could cut all 4 inches off of the back end before you fletch the arrow, and you'll actually end up with a straighter arrow than the manufacturer specs. The nice thing about the Pine Ridge arrow spinner in particular, it's actually 6 pieces. It's got 4 arms in the center and then the 2 plates on the side, and they just pop on and off. So I could pop this apart, put it in a pack, take it out to camp, take it on a elk trip if I need to. If I know that I've bent an arrow or something like that, I can quickly assemble, spin the arrow, and see if I have a good straight arrow. So that's all for this video. Again, if you have any questions, hit me up on Facebook and Instagram. Those links are down in the description below, along with my email if you like that more personal touch. And of course, you can always comment here on YouTube. And don't forget to check out those links in the description if you're interested in any of the gear I showed today. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful sunshiny creation, and we'll get to see you next time.